In Argentina, demonstrations in Jujuy call for the governor's resignation and the annulment of a constitutional reform. In Germany, hundreds took to the streets in Brandenburg to urge NATO to stop escalating the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. And in Sudan, the army and rapid support forces agreed on a new 72-hour ceasefire. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Argentina, demonstrations in the northeastern province of Jujuy demand the governor's resignation and the revocation of a constitutional reform. The social movements are mainly promoted by indigenous peoples who demand the immediate resignation of Governor Gerardo Morales. So far, the police has arrested over 40 people, including a lawmaker and a journalist on the scene covering the demonstrations. The protests come as a result of the new constitutional reform implemented by the local legislature promoted by Morales' government, punishing and restricting social protests. In Argentina, the National Meteorological Service warns provinces affected by low temperatures. The Health Ministry provided recommendations for children and people over 65 years old or with chronic illnesses to overcome this polar wave, as very low temperatures can be very harmful. Likewise, the Meteorological Service reports that the 7 affected provinces such as Salta, Jujuy, Formosa, Chaco, San Luis, San Juan, and La Rioja have temperatures ranging from -3 to -6.2 degrees Celsius. China's National Observatory on Sunday renewed a yellow alert for high temperatures as heat waves scorched some parts of the country. According to the National Meteorological Center, during daylight hours on Sunday, temperatures in parts of Inner Mongolia, Liaoning, Xinjiang, Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, Yunnan, Guangxi, and Hainan reached 35 to 36 degrees Celsius. According to the forecast, temperatures in some of these regions will reach 37 to 39 degrees Celsius and may even exceed 40 degrees Celsius in some locations. The Meteorological Center advised avoiding outdoor activities during high temperature periods in the afternoon and suggested that workers exposed to high temperatures adopt necessary protective measures. China has a 3-color-coded warning system for high temperatures, with red representing the most severe warning, followed by orange and yellow. On Saturday, Mexican health authorities reported that the current heat wave affecting the country's north has claimed the lives of 9 people. Tamaulipas Health Secretary Vicente Hernandez reported that the 9th death was a man who suffered a heat stroke while working. On the other hand, local media reported that multiple institutions have canceled classes due to the lack of air conditioning service, while several basic services have been failing due to the high temperatures. The head of the Meteorology Department, Jessica Luna Lagunes, explained that June became the hottest month of 2023. Luna also said this heat wave surpassed the previous historical record of June 1998 at 43.5 degrees Celsius. In Brazil, at least 13 people have died while over 16 remain missing so far as a result of an extratropical cyclone that has affected over 30 municipalities in Rio Grande do Sul state on the southernmost point of Brazil. The meteorological event originated in the Atlantic Ocean during this week and since Thursday night has been responsible for uninterrupted heavy rains and winds along the south and southeast coast of the country. According to local authorities, over 2,000 people have lost their homes while the number of evacuees exceeds 3,000. The hurricane's path along the coast of the region that borders with Argentina and Uruguay has left a trail of destruction, causing landslides, floods, power outages in thousands of homes, as well as the collapse of some bridges, which hinders the work of rescue teams in the area. Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva inaugurated the Rio Verde terminal in Goiás state. The ceremony marked the conclusion of the construction works of the North-South Railroad initiated 35 years ago. The railroad represented a major connection in the backbone of Brazil's rail network as it links together the ports of Itaqui, Maranhão to that of Santos and São Paulo. The construction project began late in the 1980s and it stretches from more than 2,000 kilometers. It connects Guayas, Mato Grosso, and Minas Gerais with strong production of commodities such as soy, corn, and cotton.
This railway will be extremely important to transport the products that are produced in the state of Goiás.
President Lula da Silva stressed that 90% of the railway project was built during his government and that of former President Dilma Rousseff.
I want to tell you that in my government and in Dilma's government, we built 90% of this railway. If it had been up to the Lula and Dilma governments, this railway would have been inaugurated a long time ago. And I worked hard. I went many times to this railway to build sections and inaugurate sections. And I'm happy to return to the presidency of the Republic, and during my term, we will finally inaugurate the North-South Railway, which began in 1987.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. On Saturday, Russian President Vladimir Putin met with a delegation of African heads of state in St. Petersburg at the Konstantinovsky Palace. The delegation of African presidents had previously traveled to Kiev. They intend to mediate in the ongoing conflict with Ukraine. Prior to this encounter in Moscow on June 5th, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa had met in Johannesburg with the presidents of Egypt, Senegal, Uganda, Zambia, and Comoros to agree on a peace proposal to present to both Ukraine and Russia. At a meeting in St. Petersburg, Putin said Russia is in favor of further strengthening relations with African countries as a priority of his foreign policy agenda without any interference in internal affairs, and that Russia appreciates Africa's efforts for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa presented a 10-point peace plan to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin during his visit to St. Petersburg. President Ramaphosa emphasized that the Russian-Ukrainian conflict must be settled and peace has to be achieved through diplomatic means as soon as possible. The third step was the de-escalation of hostilities. As the fourth step, the sovereignty of states and peoples must be respected in accordance with the United Nations Charter. The fifth component included security guarantees. The sixth was ensuring the export of grain and fertilizers, and the seventh was humanitarian assistance to the conflict's victims. The eighth step was to exchange of prisoners and captives, including children. The ninth named component was post-war reconstruction, and the final 10th step was for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to better and further interact with the African countries. The Russian Defense Ministry reported a missile attack against one of Ukraine's armed forces' decision-making centers. According to Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov, the attack was carried out with long-range sea and air-based precision weapons. The Russian defense did not specify the target's location, while Ukrainian authorities denounced an attack against its capital, during which 12 missiles were destroyed. The Russian army had previously reported on the possibility of attacking decision-making centers in Ukraine shortly after Kiev carried out a drone attack in Moscow in which several residential buildings were damaged and 2 people were slightly injured. Hundreds of activists gathered in Brandenburg, northeast Germany, to voice their dissent against the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's latest military exercise. The group of 700 activists who gathered in the German city urged NATO to stop escalating the Russia-Ukraine crisis by holding its largest ever aerial drill, known as Air Defender 23. The Air Force deployment exercise involved 10,000 military personnel and 250 combat aircraft from 25 nations. The anti-war advocates who took to the streets of Wiesbaden in front of the Wiesbaden Army airfield also called for diplomacy to resolve the conflict instead of escalating tension through arms deliveries. On Saturday, French police repressed demonstrators seeking to stop the construction of a new high-speed rail line between France and neighboring Italy, which opponents say will destroy the fragile alpine environment. Some 5,000 demonstrators, according to organizers, turned out for the protest near the town of Saint-Rémy-de-Maurienne in southeastern France, defying an official ban on the rally. Protesters claimed that police used tear gas and reacted violently to the mobilization. Protesters also blocked the nearby rail line, although train traffic had been halted due to the situation. The new line, which is supported by the European Union, will link the French city of Lyon with the Italian city of Turin via a 57.5-kilometer tunnel through the Alps at an estimated cost of more than 28 billion US dollars. Detractors say ecological damage risks are devastating and springs are already beginning to dry up. The International Energy Agency forecasts a shortage of oil as demand increases over the next few years. The France-based agency explained in its most recent market report that global demand will reach up to 102.3 million barrels per day and up to 105.7 million barrels by 2028, mainly driven by growth in industrialized nations and momentum in the petrochemical and aviation sectors. The International Energy Agency expects, however, an increase in exploration and production investments to levels similar to those of 2015. On Saturday in Spain, the Conservative Popular Party took office in 31 provincial capitals, ratifying its strong position for the upcoming general elections next July 23rd. PP Secretary General Cuca Gamarra told reporters that this is the first stage of the change of a political cycle that started last May the 28th, which has not ended. Gamarra said she is hopeful about PP leader Alberto Núñez Feijóo becoming the next prime minister. Meanwhile, Socialist Party spokesperson and candidate by the Zaragoza Congress, Pilar Alegría, deplored that Núñez Feijóo failed to his word by, in her words, throwing himself into the arms of Vox and endorsing the most backward policies of the far right, just to prevent PSOE candidates from winning. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, Dial 461, and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcasts. One final short break and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Saturday, the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces agreed to a new 72-hour ceasefire. According to a joint statement issued by the United States and Saudi Arabia, mediators of the armed conflict, the ceasefire took effect from 6 a.m. local time on Sunday. The statement added that the two rival parties agreed to refrain from seeking military advantage and initiating mutual attacks during the ceasefire. They also agreed to allow unimpeded movement and delivery of humanitarian assistance throughout the country. In this sense, Saudi Arabia and the U.S. noted that they might adjourn the Jeddah talks in case the two warring factions fail to observe the ceasefire. Sudan has been witnessing deadly armed clashes between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces since April 15th, which has left over 900 people dead and more than 4,000 others injured. On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his government intends to move ahead on contentious plans to change the country's judicial system. Netanyahu's statement came after talks aimed at finding a compromise solution appearing to be crumbling. The government's plans to overhaul the judiciary plunged Israel into one of its worst domestic crises ever earlier this year. Negotiations between the government and opposition parties somewhat alleviated the crisis, which attempts to find a middle ground over proposed changes to the country's justice system. Those talks were jolted last week over a crisis surrounding the powerful regular committee responsible for picking the country's judges. Iran and Saudi Arabia called for sustainable cooperation and agreed to form joint economic and political committees. Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian held a meeting with his Saudi Arabian counterpart Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud at the Persian Foreign Ministry. During the meeting, the parties discussed various issues of common interest. They later held a joint press conference in which the Iranian Foreign Minister expressed his gratitude to his Saudi counterpart for his visit to the country almost 100 days after the agreement reached in March to resume bilateral relations. In their talks, the foreign ministers agreed on the establishment of joint political, border, economic, and anti-narcotics committees, including environmental cooperation.
Our negotiations were focused on the lasting economic cooperation, trade and common investment, including progress in the private sector of Iran and Saudi Arabia. Work is currently underway to resume the activities of diplomatic and consular missions in both countries. We have witnessed the opening of the Iranian embassy in Riyadh and consulate in Jeddah, soon to be followed by the opening of the Saudi embassy in Tehran.
And in the context of Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan's landmark visit to Tehran, the Saudi top official held talks with Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi. During the meeting, Prince Faisal handed the Iranian president an invitation from custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman, to visit Saudi Arabia. The two sides also reviewed the bilateral relations and ways to enhance and develop them in various fields to achieve the prospects of the two countries' people. Prince Faisal and Raisi also discussed the developments on the regional and international arenas and the efforts made in this regard. China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang received U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Beijing on Sunday. According to local media, both diplomats held talks regarding the country's bilateral relations and addressed important international issues of common interest, such as economic cooperation and the conflict in Ukraine. After the meeting, the U.S. State Department released a statement assuring the parties had agreed to meet again soon in Washington as part of the lines of communication that both powers want to keep open. The U.S. Secretary of State arrived in China for a two-day visit on Sunday morning, becoming the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit China since U.S. President Joe Biden began his term in 2021. Blinken was originally scheduled to visit China in February, but abruptly scrapped his plans after the United States protested and later shut down a Chinese research balloon flying over its soil. Japan's Emperor Naruhito and Empress Masako arrived in the Indonesian capital Jakarta on Saturday for their first state visit since ascending to the chrysanthemum throne in 2019. The trip to the Southeast Asia's biggest economy, which began on June 17th and will last until June 23rd, includes a meeting with Indonesian President Joko Widodo. The royal couple will also visit a military cemetery where 28 former Japanese soldiers who stayed and fought for Jakarta in the Indonesian War of Independence between 1945 and 1949 are buried. They will also pay a visit to a new mass rapid transit train depot constructed in the capital with Japan's help and a Tokyo-funded pump station that prevents flooding. The couple have gradually resumed public duties after limiting them during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUREnglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.